here to talk about starting up, that fascinating dream that many people actually harbor. And I derived, as with so many others, inspiration from the likes of Steve Jobs, of Bill Gates, of Page and Brin, Zuckerberg, Williams, Google. I mean, all these wonderful companies that started in a garage by a couple of people who had this wonderful notion of changing the world using the power of their idea and actually make a huge impact. And I try to do that too. But here, the story that I have to say is that it's not always that startups work, and there are many reasons that startups don't quite pan out the way that they're supposed to. In fact, statistics say that 90% of startups don't quite pan out the way they're supposed to. They fail. And I see that as a battle scar that I carry, that I actually did a startup that didn't work out. But the good bit is I learned so much from it, and that is going to form the crux of what I'm going to be talking about here. How I actually failed to live the startup dream and came out really, really wiser at the end of it. But first, a little bit about myself. I actually consider myself fortunate to largely have made the right career choices at critical moments in my lifetime, and things turned out really, really well. Way back in 1997, when I graduated from IIM Cal, I said, look, I've come a long distance compared to a lot of people. And I said, all right, you know what? If I were to make it as a CEO of an organization by 35, I'm doing good. Right? So that was my next big BHAG goal. And it so turned out that I kind of climbed the corporate ladder pretty well and ended up as the country manager of eBay India at the age of 36. So frankly, I wasn't doing too bad. And life was good. Lot accomplished, lot of learning, lot of impact. But there comes a time in everybody's career where you find yourself at the crossroads. You've enjoyed what you've done thus far, but there's always this feeling deep within that you could do a lot more. And I started thinking on what else could be done. And that was around the time that the startup revolution, and I'm talking 2010, around that time, the startup revolution in India was truly maturing. You were finding umpteen cases of young Indians building world-class products, serving the entire globe. And that fascinated me. And I said, look, perhaps I have the skill sets, I have the capabilities, I could put together a team and get onto a great idea that could actually make a huge difference. And even more interestingly, I had nothing to lose. I had everything to gain. And that's how I kind of explained it and rationalized this to myself. I was doing fairly well from a career perspective, a decent amount of money in the bank. I had no mortgage to pay, and I had no health care as of that point of time. And I said, look, if I don't do this now, there is no better time that I can even think of doing this. And so I started dreaming of this billion-dollar startup. All right, okay, not a billion. And I said, maybe I'll settle for $500 million, maybe 200-300 million, 100 should do. All right, okay. I could think of an idea that could build a $50 million startup, and I started ruminating on what I could do about it. And I thought, and I said, all right, let me first try and figure what is the playbook for getting a startup together. Courtesy conversations with friends and mentors in the startup world, lots of material on the internet, very, very interesting YouTube videos and books. I kind of figured the playbook is actually pretty simple, right? You pick a problem which is unsolved or a need that is underserved, obsess about it, figure out a solution, talk to people, iterate it, make it even better, put together a team, build something, get a prototype out, get it out, test market it, continue iterating, get a co-founder in, get some money in, some funding, start scaling the business, start scaling it. One thing leads to another, even more funding, and one fine day, you'll have an IPO, or perhaps you'll have someone buy you out for that famed $50 million. It actually was pretty simple, but I still needed a damn good idea, and one fine day, the light bulb came on. I actually looked at people around me and figured they were leading what I thought was unsustainable lives. Long work hours, lack of sleep, no exercise, sedentary lifestyle, junk food. diabetes, hypertension, stress at work, cardiac problems in their 30s, and all this because they just weren't moving their butt. They were not trying to be even vaguely active. Forget about leading a super fit regime. And I, with all my passion for fitness, said, what if I could actually go figure a solution that can make people lead healthier lives? And that notion fascinated me. So I obsessed about that problem and put together a solution where technology actually meets health. And this solution was actually pretty cool. I said, look, let's get wearable devices on people, stuff you wear on your arm or on the belt clip, which tracks you 24/7, figures out every single activity that you do deep analytics on it, get people into a social context, some notions of gamification, all of this leading to this utopian notion of behavior modification. I said, look, I could actually put together a product that could make people feel good now. And I was super excited about it. This was a real wonderful idea, as I saw it at that point of time. And a lot of people that I spoke to and bouncing off this idea conquered. Yes, I mean, people are leading unsustainable lives. Technology can solve for it. Big data and analytics can make a huge difference to it. And I said, sure, this makes sense. So let me get cracking. And that's what I did. Brought on board a co-founder who shared the same vision. We put together a team, got an office, started making a snazzy pitch deck that can actually tell our story to the entire world, got the website design done, and started building the product. And we were at it for close to a year, and we were making decent progress, but fate had other plans. You know what? It doesn't always work the way it's supposed to. So a few things happened here. First, ideas are cheap. We had a great idea, but ideas are cheap, right? Everybody has ideas. What makes the difference is how you actually go about executing it. You know what? Getting a startup off the ground and building a product and taking it out to market is like navigating this huge cruise ship in troubled, stormy waters while doing cartwheels, balancing a teacup in one hand. And that is actually underplaying the complexity of this entire thing. But sure, ideas are cheap. Not that we made a bad job of executing it, but there's so much more that we could have done to get stuff done on time and get the product out into the market. And hiring is tough. If you really want to build a great startup, which makes a huge difference to people's lives, you need really, really great talent. And I spent half of the first 6 months just hiring people who have the right skill set, who could see the passion and vision that we saw and could actually make a difference to our business. And that wasn't easy at all. After a point of time, we actually got the kind of team that we actually wanted, but the first 6 months were backbreaking when it comes to acquiring talent. And who wants to join a young startup which has got a fascinating dream, which may or may not get realized? And that's what a lot of people actually asked us. And finally, time is cruel. I don't need to tell you about that unforgiving, undying minute. And you always wonder, can I pack a few more hours into this day? And you know how that works. It doesn't really work the way you want to. And this is just external. And there are these demons in the mind, right? I mean, stuff that you think of, this thing called doubt and uncertainty. And we had a fair measure of that too. Is this good enough to be released? You're obsessing about something, you're building it, you've tested it, you think it's good enough, and then you start having these doubts in the mind saying, will the consumer out there actually like what I did? Maybe I can tweak it a little bit more, and you spend more time, you actually waste more time in iterating your product. And then can we actually market this? Look, you've done this in the Excel sheets. The Excel sheets are tickety-boo, right? I mean, all the numbers add up, and there is that $50 million at the end of that entire rainbow. But here and now, will the customer actually appreciate what you're offering him, and will he or she pay the kind of money that you want them to pay you? And that's a doubt that you'll always have. And there's always a degree of uncertainty in the mind, especially when you're in a startup. And finally, you start questioning yourself. Is the startup thing for me? Look, I was having a pretty good career, and I junked all of that and tried to pursue the startup dream. And it isn't quite going the way that I wanted it to. Am I doing the right thing? Look at the opportunity cost that I'm actually foregoing. And one thing leads to another, and you start wondering whether you're actually doing the right thing, till it actually came to a point where we said, you know what, we have a great idea, but the product that we've actually built is perhaps a couple of years too early for the market, and the customer isn't quite appreciating what we are offering, and perhaps our path to monetization, our path to profitability would have been set back by a few more years than we had originally anticipated. Not that I really had a problem, but I perhaps lacked the patience to persist with it for that long. And I said, look, he who fights and runs away will actually turn back and live to fight another day, and maybe I'll actually go back a few years from now and do the same or a different startup, because there's so much more that I learned from this which is invaluable. And there are 3 things out of those learnings that I actually want to share today before I end this talk. And I call this learning the hard way. A lot of people learn the hard way. Very few people have the opportunity to actually share that with the rest of the world, and I think it's my privilege to share this with the rest of the world. 1, big learning, they are not you. And who do I mean by they? They could be anyone. They could be your customers. They could be your suppliers, your vendors. They could be your employees. Quite often, when you're in that pressure cooker situation in a startup, you project your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions on the rest of the world. You think everybody is going to think and behave just like you do. It doesn't work that way. Your customers will not always respond to the same stimuli as you expect them to. The best that you can do is to maintain an objective distance from the concept, from the customer, from the notion, from the business, and keep challenging yourself at all points of time if it is going to work that way. So learning number 1, they are not you. Don't just check with your friends and family, check with a large number of people, and then figure if you're doing the right thing. Number 2, the echo chamber. You know what, the startup ecosystem is actually pretty small, and it's great. There is great support, there is great motivation that you get from the startup ecosystem, but it's also an echo chamber. There are a small set of players who are always mutually reinforcing each other's ideas and giving positive strokes to everyone. And before you know it, you're talking the same language. Before you know it, you're saying, look, I have this idea that's going to change the world, and you start behaving that way. And you start losing objectivity, especially when it comes to the startup ecosystem, because you're not listening to the voices of reason that are out there, and you're filtering all of that. That's my second big learning. Remember that there's an echo chamber, and you need to be cognizant of that. And the third biggest learning is always have a plan C. Why plan C, you might ask? Plan A, which is your original plan, is a piece of fiction. It's out there in presentations, it's out there in business plans, it's there to be shown. That's about it. It's at best a work of fiction. So what's plan B? Plan B is your worst case scenario, right? In reality, pretty much what happens is plan C is what you need. And if you don't have a plan C, then may God bless you. And that's my biggest learning, because everything would take twice as long and cost twice as much, and would perhaps not quite match the quality that you wanted it to at the end of the set time that you had actually had for this entire initiative. And therefore, if you don't have a plan C, may God bless you. The one big learning that I actually walked away from all this is whether you're in a corporate or whether it is in a startup, the challenges are actually very, very different. I walked in to building a startup fascinated by the romance of changing the world, and I walked out of it a lot more wiser, with tons more gray hair, not losing any of the optimism of having changed the world, but just having seen both sides of the coin, which made me a lot more smarter and a lot more wiser. But then, you know what? These are just 2 different sides of the entire coin. And I'm sure a lot of you out here are potentially making these decisions even as I speak on whether you want to pursue a career in the corporate world, or whether you would want to do a startup at any point of time. I just hope these perspectives would help you take the decision. But ultimately, you'll have to ask yourself, what do you want to be? There are no right and wrong answers. Different answers work for different people at different points of time. But end of the day, as long as you're enjoying that journey, learning something from it, and using whatever occasion or opportunity that is available to share that with the broader world, you'll be a richer and a wiser man. Thank you so much for your time. I truly enjoyed this. Thank you.